interest rates kept going down, there was always a way to put off the pain, a reason to borrow more, a justification for not balancing the books. But the day of reckoning is approaching. When? Well, we can't say exactly. It might be a long, slow, drawn-out process that drains your wealth over the next decade. Or this time next year, the financial system could be breaking apart. It's impossible to say. But we think that savers and investors who are not aware of the full risks and who fail to protect themselves will suffer the most. The vast majority of people here in Britain will have no idea what action to take as they watch their wealth and financial security drain away, out of reach, perhaps forever. The important question for you is, when this happens, will you know what to do? When these events unfold, very few people will have any idea how to respond. Most will see the assets they've worked all their life to secure begin to lose value rapidly. It won't matter if you have £5,000 in the bank or £500,000. It won't matter if you own a 5-bedroom house in Esher or a 1-bedroom flat in Croydon. This crisis will lay waste to the wealth of anyone who isn't prepared for it. The most horrible feeling will be the loss of control and the confusion. Desperate to take some sort of action, many people will feel pressured into making investments that could blow up in their faces. The cost of making the wrong move with your money over the next few years could be lasting. What if your money is trapped in one of the banks that collapse? What if your invested wealth is stuck in one of the companies most likely to crash? This is about knowing what you can do with your money if the worst of the crisis unfolds. Our intention is not to be melodramatic. But if events unravel as we expect, thousands of people will lose a lot of what they have, and they won't be able to do a thing about it. By the time most people have pieced it all together, or the true significance of this information makes the headline news in the financial press, it will be too late. And that's why so many people could get caught out and lose so much money. It's essential you prepare for these events. You can't rely on mainstream commentators to help you. So who do you listen to? For most people, disasters of this magnitude come out of the blue. But for our readers, financial crises are rarely a surprise. Often we spot these dangers approaching, as we have this one, and give our readers time to prepare. For more than a decade, MoneyWeek has been sharing its insights with private investors. We have helped steer them away from dangerous areas of the market into profitable ones. In short, we have a track record of getting many of these things right. We gave a warning to steer clear of British banks as early as 2005, but when they crashed in 2007, a lot of Britons still had their money tied up in banking shares, and they lost a lot of it. Let's take another example, property. In October 2006, both the FT and Telegraph were singing property's praises. But we saw things differently. Our research told us the market had dangerously topped out. Our message was loud and clear. Get out of property now. Within just a year, the property market began its steep fall, just as we'd warned. We don't know if you personally lost money in the property collapse, but many people did. Thanks to the UK's obsessive property mania, egged on by the mainstream media, many unfortunate people timed one of the most important investments of their lives completely wrong. On the other hand, those that listened to our timely warning had the opportunity to secure their wealth.
Without the catalyst of MoneyWeek, I surely would be part of the herd and suffered great losses through these challenging times. That is a fact.
Another example. When we predicted the oil super spike in May 2006, those that listened made a swift 82% gain. We have a track record of getting many big calls right. We're proud of it. It's what makes us confident and serious about the job we do here at MoneyWeek, providing crucial and lucrative insight on the markets.
This is simply a note of thanks to you and your staff in providing publication that has personally guided me into safer financial waters during this time of uncertainty.
Throughout 2007, we repeatedly warned our readers to ditch the FTSE, while the mainstream commentators, with great confidence, wrongly reassured investors there was nothing to worry about. The FTSE giants have nothing to fear. Telegraph, 29th of July 2007. Once again, our team saw which way the wind was blowing. Here comes the crunch. Money Week, 27th of July 2007. And right before the colossal crash of 2008, we issued a stark warning. The credit carnage is far from over. Our readers had the time to get out and avoid the pain felt by thousands of investors.
I have to hand it to you. You have forecast everything during the downturn, and none of this is vaguely a surprise to you.
More recently, we gave our readers advance warning about both the Eurozone crisis and China's economic downturn, and showed them the best ways to profit from both. Our message right now is that we believe Britain is entering a long, downward cycle, one that's likely to be punctuated by a devastating financial and even social collapse. Our research group draws upon the knowledge and experience of some of the brightest and most forward-thinking financial minds in the country. The Money Week team includes an award-winning defensive asset manager who's responsible for more than £1 billion in client money, a financial publishing magnate and self-made millionaire, one of the most respected financial commentators in Britain, and one man so innovative in his reading of the markets, he now advises the European Commission. These are men and women who spend every day of their lives either working in or analysing the financial markets, but who most importantly do not get swallowed up by mainstream viewpoints. They are smart, independent people who aren't afraid to seriously question conventional wisdom, to stand apart from their peers and cosy groupthink, and to see what's really going on beneath the surface. The fact is that many ideas about investing, which emerged over the past few decades, have to be radically re-evaluated. The idea that you can just buy and forget it, whether we're talking shares or property, is plain wrong. That's how things used to work, but not anymore. That kind of wrong thinking over the coming months and years could be disastrous for you. Over the last decade, we've shown our readers where the markets were heading months, sometimes years in advance. The value of that insight is incalculable. We have helped keep safe the ambitions and financial futures of countless people. Again, we cite our success and experience with the crises of the past because there's an even bigger crisis looming. Britain's huge accumulation of debt means its fate has already been sealed. We are about to pay for what we've borrowed, and in the worst possible way. If you have any remaining doubts that a day of financial reckoning approaches, watch the next 2 minutes of this film, and we'll prove it to you conclusively. In recorded economic history, every single country with debts as big as ours, every single one, has suffered a devastating economic collapse. There are no exceptions. For example, during the Great Depression, when thousands of ordinary people lost everything, America's total debt hit 252% of GDP. In any circumstances, that's bad. But things can get worse. During the Japanese economic collapse, which triggered more than 2 decades of deflation and a 75% drop in the stock market, Japanese total debt hit 498% of GDP. That's twice as bad as the level of debt seen in America during the Great Depression. If Britain's current debts were at those kind of levels, it would be worrying. But in truth, our debts are now much worse than either of those 2 examples. Shockingly, our debt load is now on a scale comparable with one of the most frightening economic disasters of the 20th century. We're talking about the Weimar Republic. Back then, suffering under the weight of brutal war reparations, civil unrest, and shattered public finances, the Weimar Republic's total debt equaled 913% of its economy. Of course, you know what happened next. The government printed money and hyperinflation took off. In the end, it was cheaper to decorate your home with banknotes than wallpaper. Ultimately, the country descended into a period of economic and social crisis, a catastrophe that ended with the rise of the Nazi Party. And that was with debts worth 913% of the economy. Today, Britain's total debt equals 900% of the economy. When you add up our financial sector debt, government debt, personal debt, and corporate debts, our debt load rivals the Weimar Republic in scale. To put it mildly, This worries us a great deal. It should worry you too, because this simple fact alone proves just how inevitable Britain's coming crisis is. Remember, as you saw earlier, the only thing delaying the crisis right now is the fact that interest rates are at historical lows. That's what allows life to carry on as normal. But things won't be this way for long, because the simple fact is, when interest rates rise, and they will rise, Britain will face the greatest crisis in generations. And there's one more thing you need to consider. The first danger you face won't be the falling price of your shares, nor will it be the insolvency of the banks. Those things we believe will happen. But first, you face an even more immediate threat: the desperate actions of our own government. There is nothing the government can do to solve the debt crisis. Better people than David Cameron and George Osborne have tried to get out of similar crises in the past, and failed. As you have seen, the hole we've dug for ourselves is simply too big to ever fill back in. But that won't stop politicians making a series of bad decisions to fight the inevitable while they're still in power. They must be seen to be doing something, and that's bad news for you. As the crisis deepens, panic will take hold. In a desperate attempt to pay off the debts and try to regain control, politicians will cast around for any sources of money available and use almost any means to seize it. Invariably, that means they'll turn to their primary source of income: you. Throughout history, when countries are in financial crisis, governments automatically raid the wealth of their citizens. It's all they can do. It goes as far back as ancient Rome. As the empire crumbled and inflation raged, the emperors raised taxes over and over, squeezing as much coin as they could from their subjects. Back to the 20th century, in 1933, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forbidding the man on the street to hold any significant amount of gold. In the midst of the Great Depression, the government basically made it illegal for anyone but them to hoard the precious yellow metal. Refusal to comply with these demands was met with a 5-year prison sentence. That's essentially how the US filled Fort Knox, by seizing other people's gold. Just 2 years ago in Hungary, facing a debt crisis similar to our own, the government nationalized all pensions. In effect, they confiscated people's savings. Can you imagine waking up one day and being told that the income for the last 30 years of your life hangs on a government promise? In Greece right now, benefits have been cut to the bone, salaries and pensions have been slashed up to 40%, and the retirement age has been hiked to generate more income from the population, the very victims of the crisis. But you don't have to look too far from home to find one of the cruelest examples of seizing private wealth. In 1974, the top rate of income tax under Edward Heath was 83%. Imagine how it would feel to be so blatantly fleeced by your own government. In other words, in times of financial panic, the government will come after the people with money and savings. If you're someone who's worked hard, been responsible, considered the future, thought about your family, planned for your old age, and built up savings and some wealth, you are the prime target. The government and financial authorities will never admit this, of course. They will never announce or admit to these confiscation policies. In fact, their official statements are designed to conceal it. And yet, in the end, their actions and the new controls they implement will undermine some of the core principles of the British way of life. The protection of private property, individual freedom, the rule of law, clear limitations on the role of the state, or, to put it colloquially, an Englishman's home is his castle. It's not just your home that will come under threat, it's your money, and the outcome could be very uncomfortable indeed. Just imagine the following situations. Your spending money limited. You set off to take a brief holiday on the Mediterranean.